Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Nile, aka NYL. I want to talk about why you guys might be failing to take sights on CS2, and this mainly comes down to either you not putting yourself at a good enough advantage, meaning you're not figuring out things like where the enemy is positioned, you're not using effective utility, and maybe you're not planning how to actually take the site with your team correctly. Or it might be because you guys are putting yourselves at a disadvantage or executing while you guys are at a disadvantageous position, meaning the enemies know where you are, or maybe they're already prepared for a site take from you guys. Maybe you guys have done the same pattern too many times in a row, things like that that put you at a disadvantageous position relative to the enemy team. So when you're trying to take site, you should be trying to make it as easy as possible for you and your team by figuring out how you guys are going to effectively take the site before you actually begin your execute. You should be baiting out enemy utility. You guys should be figuring out where their positions are, figuring out what their habits are, and then playing off of those as well. You'll also want to be making it as difficult as possible for the enemy team to actually stop you once you're executing. And you do this by baiting out their utility in the early round and making sure they don't have a lot of options when it comes to stopping you besides straight up gunfights. So assuming you guys aren't going for a straight up rush, most of the time you guys will want to take the early round as your opportunity to bait out enemy utility and figure out enemy positions. Because a lot of the time what tends to happen is that people will go straight to a site and start setting up their smokes and everything, only to just get stopped by one piece of utility from the CTs, just like this. If you've already thrown your Molotovs, used your smokes, and then somebody puts this down, pushing into the site would basically be a death sentence. You don't want to have to push through enemy utility when you're trying to take a site. So in order to not have to deal with things like that, you're going to want to take your time to bait out enemy utility. Shoot a little bit and make some noise and get the enemies to use all their flashes, their smokes, their mollies, as much as you can. Remember, you get almost 2 minutes to play your round out. You don't have to commit within the first 30 seconds every time. Take your time and make sure you guys are using the early round effectively. So once you've forced out most of your enemy's utility and you have a good idea of what positions they might be playing, you're going to want to take a little bit of time to talk with your team about how that particular execute is going to go down. So as you guys are preparing to take the site, you guys should be establishing every person's role in the execute. You guys should know who the entry fragger is, who their support and follow-up is going to be, and who's going to be taking care of utility. You guys should also be aware of what pathing you're going to take. So if your entry decides to go straight to grill instead of going onto site directly, you're going to want to have somebody holding their coffins so that if they get peeked out, they're not going to die immediately and they're not going to feel like they're getting wasted. The follow-up player also needs to be close to the entry fragger because you're going to want to make sure that you trade him as soon as he goes down. So establishing all of these roles is super crucial to making a good execute. Not being clear on who's going to be doing what usually results in two people assuming the same role. Most of the time that's the entry role, and then you end up having people that are looking at the same angles and not properly covering each other. That's why you'll see a lot of the time people going in and just getting double killed on site. If your team doesn't know where the entry is going to go, most of the time they're not going to be prepared for which angles he's not going to clear. Make sure that you talk about what utility you're going to be using and where you guys are going to be using it. So think about where the enemies typically play and what positions you think they're going to be playing, and then plan your utility accordingly. If you think people are going to be playing coffins on B, then smoke off coffins. Don't take the risk to just push out and have to deal with such a powerful angle. And speaking of angles, I like to think there's 3 main types of angles that you should be prepared for. Those are the angles that people can set up crossfires from, like for example from CT to new box. You're going to want to take a smoke and smoke that off so that they don't have such a powerful position. Another type of angle you need to be worried about is the powerful angle where people have a lot of cover. So new box in particular is a really strong angle because people can peek in from the left and the right side. And if you're not careful, people can even go back through this wall as they're fighting you if you're distracted a bit and reposition really quickly to the side of oranges. So as a T, you don't want to have to deal with this angle because it's very powerful. So when you're dealing with powerful angles like that, it's typically best to have some sort of utility to flush out those angles. For example, if you aim right here and throw this Molotov, you're gonna molly the whole back of new box and nobody's gonna be able to play that position. In that case, you've effectively taken care of this angle because the person is gonna have to push out to the sides or out in the open and just fight you. They're not gonna have the ability to just jiggle peek you and waste your time and potentially set up another crossfire with their teammates. Now the third type of angle you're gonna need to worry about are the so-called rat angles. These are areas like dark right here where people can hide really deep and you won't be able to clear them without fully swinging them. These type of angles are really powerful because they tend to be the last ones that you clear, and a lot of the time they even go overlooked. So somebody might just be hiding in dark and you assume that the site is clear, and then as soon as you start planting, he's just gonna swing out and kill you while you're planting. This can end a round really quickly because when the bomb planter goes down, the CTs are aware of the bomb location. So now not only is your team down a player, but the CTs now know where the bomb is and they're not gonna let you plant for free again. They're gonna be making sure that they keep up the pressure to not allow you to plant in a safe location. And that's usually gonna make you plant in some obscure spot that you don't have a lot of cover from. They're gonna make the next plant much more difficult because you're going to have to face the risk of getting swung at any moment. And most likely you're gonna end up planting in a non-default position, which means that you're gonna have difficulty defending the bomb once it's actually down. And this is not even mentioning the fact that as the time goes down, the CTs are coming closer and closer, and you're running out of time to plant the bomb. Your utility is probably fading away too, so all of this just means that it's a really bad idea to not clear the site effectively. So definitely deal with all those rat positions, smoke or Molotov, the powerful positions, and make sure that you don't allow any crossfires to be established. So when you guys are taking the site, you'll want to use most of your utility on the execute. Don't try to hold on to your nades for the post plant because it's not always a good idea and they don't always end up getting used. Most of the time people will even die without using their utility, and that just means it's a waste of money. Try to use your utility to deal with those three types of angles that I talked about. So make sure you guys are using your utility to clear out angles and break crossfires between the enemies. It is really important that you guys break these crossfires because you want to only be focusing on one side of the site at a time. As you guys execute onto a site, you want to eliminate all the 50-50 angles that you can. So if there's an angle that you're gonna have to do a 180 to effectively clear out, you're gonna want to use your utility to block that off. Or you're gonna want to use utility to clear out positions so that 50-50 swing doesn't have to take place. Another reason why a lot of executes fail is because people don't support their entry enough. And by not supporting your entry, I'm mainly talking about not using good utility and not getting the trade as they die. It's almost inevitable that your entry is going to get killed off as they go into sight, but your job should be to make sure that they get traded. If you don't trade your entry, you're wasting their life and they're gonna end up not wanting to entry for your team. Sometimes they might still continue to entry, but they're gonna be much more hesitant as they enter onto the site because they know that you're not going to trade them or that you don't have their back. So what you'll wanna do is make sure that you smoke off angles, clear off angles so that they don't have to deal with too many angles, as well as throwing effective utility that they don't have to dodge. If you're still throwing flashes that blind your teammates or that they have to turn away from, then you're using your flashes wrong. And I see that way too often. If your teammate has to dodge your flash, you shouldn't have thrown that flash. A good flash is a flash that your teammate doesn't have to dodge and it allows him to keep moving forward. So as I was saying in the beginning of this video, people often push out in disadvantageous positions, which means that the enemies are more prepared for your side take than they should be. If you're giving off too many sound cues and too much utility early in the round, the enemies are probably going to start preparing for your execute. You guys should not be giving out free information for the CTs to play off of. This is undoubtedly going to make your side take much more difficult and less successful. So in order to combat this, you're going to want to make sure that you play unpredictably and that you're giving out as little information as possible. As soon as you come close to sights, you should be walking. Good opponents will be counting your utility as well as paying attention to footsteps so that they can figure out how many people are close to their site. So it's really important that you shift once you come close to a bomb site and continue to shift until you leave it. A lot of times I see people start running away from right here in banana, but what you should realize is somebody playing new box can actually hear you running away like this. So it's really important that you start walking and only run once you're far enough from the site that you can't be heard. Another type of information that people aren't really aware they're giving out is their patterns. If you're constantly taking the same site over and over again in the same manner, your enemies are going to adapt to you eventually. So it's really important that you start changing up your habits once you've taken a site in the same way a couple times in a row. Don't let the enemies get too familiar with your playstyle and make sure to keep them on their toes. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any comments or feedback from me, as well as any ideas for videos in the future. So yeah, thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.